Lawmakers in Washington, D.C. had a pretty busy week, from working to keep the government funded to reaction to the second assassination attempt of the former president. This morning, we have Oklahoma Congressman Josh Brecheen to give us an update from Capitol Hill. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kylie. Let it be with you.
All right, so let's start with the latest here. We have 45 days until the 2024 presidential election. This past Sunday, though, there was a second assassination attempt on the former president. Can you share what your reaction was when you learned about this?
That there needed to be additional personnel assigned to the president, and it was not a matter of funding, that it was a matter of allocation of resources and the ability to, and we're learning now, of course, that there was no sweep of the area. Secret Service did, the individual that was able to see the barrel and take the shot, greatly to be commended. But the lack of personnel to do a sweep of the area, alongside what we know, what is still yet to be known in Butler, and the limitation of the inner perimeter size, truly manned by Secret Service personnel, needs to be to the level of presidential, not just a candidate. In fact, here in a few moments, I'll go to the floor and we'll actually hopefully pass a measure that will give no latitude as a major candidate, that you would have that same level of protection as any president. Donald Trump a few days ago was saying that his number of personnel assigned to him has increased. This is going to make sure that occurs and there's no discrepancy there.
I was actually about to just ask you, Congressman, about what's being done right now in the House, at least, when it comes to what's going on with the Secret Service. And as we see, again, a second assassination attempt on a former president. So you're saying you will be going on the floor today to discuss this, right?
That's correct. To vote on it.
Okay.
And hopefully it will sail through. I think it's just more than common sense. And again, President Biden would have unilaterally the ability to assign more agents. And Secret Service are not always simply providing protection for high-profile individuals. They're also involved in different crimes, right? Wire fraud, money transactions. And so there is a reassignment of personnel that could easily happen. What we're going to do is instead of just allowing the president to make that decision and from one president to another to adjust that, we're just going to put it into law.
All right, and switching gears here, the House rejected a plan to keep the government funded on Wednesday. Part of that included the SAVE Act that would require proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. Now, some lawmakers, they called it, quote, a non-starter. What's your opinion here?
Well, it was the majority of the Democrats who voted against that measure. Their argument is that why do we need to do this? Why do we need to scrub the voter rolls? They contend it's not happening. You got a Heritage report that shows in the state of Pennsylvania alone, over 2 decades, there's been 20,000 illegals that have had the chance to cast a ballot. If you look at Arizona, if you look at Georgia, when the 2020 election occurred, and both of those cases were decided by 12,000 votes cast in terms of how the electors would go for either President Trump or Biden. Thousands of votes make a difference. And so for those that will say, well, why do we need to do this? It's already law. Okay, well, what's the problem then? If you're just concerned that it would just be redundant, why would you be opposed to it? So it's not reality. If it was just simple redundancy, they would say, fine, we'll put a vote up. We'll do this. But there's more to this than they're willing to admit. And we do have illegals that are slipping through the cracks because photo identification is a strong deterrent. And you got too many states right now that do not require photo identification and that are not scrubbing their voting rolls for those that are deceased or otherwise illegally casting ballots.
Congressman, we are less than 2 weeks until a possible government shutdown. What do you hope to see in the next plan?
I want to see an avoidance of an omnibus, and I do not want to go into a situation where we're trying to negotiate for an entire year with the Senate led by Democrats and a White House led by Democrats, because we'll get the same result we got back in the spring, which was heightened spending, their policies. So why I wanted to see the SAVE Act that Chip Roy was going to pair with moving into March. That was the best approach to give Republicans a chance, hopefully. And my great hope, and I think it could be easily within reach as a reality in the next 45 days to have a president that is a Republican and a Senate that is controlled by Republicans.
Okay. And this last question here, some of the bills that you have voted in favor of here more recently include some sort of action that prevents foreign adversaries from doing business in the country. Can you talk more about your concerns before we let you go?
Yeah, there's some measures that passed this week off the House floor. I hope that they have traction and move on the Senate side. One of those would allow the Department of Ag to stop land transactions that we know are entities that are within the CCP, Chinese control, that China has, laws on the books that subject any of their citizenry to no longer having true private property rights. They have to, at the government's whims, turn over information. And so we know that China does not have this nation's best interest in mind. And so we believe that that is long-term damaging to this country to have Chinese owning land. Another measure this last week that was on the floor that we passed was to stop the growth of Chinese influence within higher ed and these Confucius institutes. One more measure on the international front was the World Health Organization trying to allow a global shutdown of businesses. That's what it could lead to if we don't have a ratification, as the Constitution calls for, 2/3 of the Senate. So we put a measure forth that said anything that we would do with the World Health Organization has to come with a Senate ratification, not what Barack Obama did, utilizing the UN framework to get us into the Paris Climate Accord. Constitution is very clear. Anything on the international front for a treaty, it has to come with ratification from the Senate. And many people are avoiding that rule of law and are trying to skirt that measure. And we're pronouncing that you can't do that.
Congressman Josh Burkeen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hope to talk to you here soon.
Thank you, Kylie.